Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rose Report. Tonight, my guest is Isaiah Smith, a New Zealand political commentator. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to get into today's topic and chat about these different things.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to have you on because there's been the announcement that New Zealand's Liberal Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is not going to seek re-election. She had quite an interesting declaration of this where she talks about not having the energy or the desire to run for re-election. It was kind of something I hadn't seen before. Just to start off, is this surprising to you as someone in New Zealand who's following the political process?
Yes and no. When the announcement happened, it completely took me by surprise. Like I didn't expect that sort of thing to happen. But in the light of everything that is going on and how it's going here in New Zealand, I'm not surprised at all. Uh, Labour and Jacinda Ardern have been trending down on the polls quite a lot recently, and with their different policies and what's been going on and the way that the economy is going and the just the fallout of how the COVID pandemic has been handled here in New Zealand. um, I'm not surprised that she's done this because she is a populist at the end of the day, and she no longer has that popular support. She's only just clinging to a little bit of a lead as preferred prime minister, but that's just popular opinion. That has nothing to do with actually what happens on voting day. Whereas the her party is well behind. In New Zealand, we don't vote for the leader; we vote for the party, and that
Mhm.
determines who the leader is. So um, whilst if you are popular as a leader, that's going to help your party. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So people will be like, oh, we don't mind Jacinda too much. We don't like all her policies, but she's a likable person and stuff like that. But we're going to vote for the other guys now because they've made a monumental screw up of everything.
And in
So
terms, oh, sorry, go ahead.
carry on, carry on.
In terms of the political parties there in the United States, we have the two major parties, and then we have libertarians and Greens, they float around. But Republicans and Democrats, the only one who have a real shot at running the country. What is the system there? Are there two major political parties or are there more there?
We do have two major parties, but the minor parties actually do have a say in shaping the government here. Our system is not perfect, and if I was going to be looking at a system that I think works a lot better, but again has its own flaws as well, the Australian system, where they have preferential voting, so your vote doesn't get wasted, works very well, and it stops you having so much of a two-horse race. But in New Zealand, we have MMP, which we go out, we get our vote for our party member, our parliament party member for our area, and then we vote for which party we want to see running the country. So our two major parties are the National Party, which is more centre right, and then the Labour Party, which is more centre left, which is the party that Jacinda Ardern sits at the head of. And then after that, we have the ACT Party, which is very similar to the Libertarian Party. And then we have our Greens Party, which is pretty self explanatory, hard raging leftist Muppets. Um, and Labour's just that with a guise of centre leftist over the top of them. And so
Mhm.
what ends up happening is the major parties, they will usually actually not get enough votes to form a government, and
Right.
they will have to form a coalition with smaller parties. And depending what percentage of vote the smaller parties have got, you might end up with two or three parties forming a coalition to run the country. So it does balance things out where you don't have just one party doing whatever the heck they want to
Mhm.
with enough seats in parliament that they're like, we're going to do X, Y, Z and just charge everything through. But they actually have to work together with different people, and that which balances things out. You get a much bigger cross section of the country actually being represented.
Right.
So we've had two terms now, so 6 years of Jacinda and the Labour Party running things. So the first time that they were in power, they were in a coalition. The National Party actually had just under 49% of the vote, and everybody expected that there was one other small party called New Zealand First that was expected to be a kingmaker and were expected to go with National. Their leader was considered a lot like Donald Trump in that, and he did a hard switcheroo and went with Labour because they gave him deputy prime minister, which was all he actually wanted. And I've been screaming from the mountaintops. I was like, this man can't be trusted. He never does what he says he's going to do. He's been in politics in here in New Zealand for like 40 years, and every time he says he's going to do something and everyone votes for him because he's going to do it, he gets the opportunity and he never does it. Like, you could just don't vote for him. And I'm like, no, he's going to do the thing, and he
did not do the thing.
And so that ushered in this Jacinda Ardern-led Labour government that we've now had for the last 6 years. And in the last election, with the onset of COVID and people's at that time, the veneer was shiny and everybody was loving Jacinda, and we've talked about it before, and the whole world loved her. And I was like, man, New Zealand's got the best COVID policies. Look how they're protecting everyone. I was like, dude, our economy is built on tourism. This is not sustainable. This is not going to work, and this bubble is going to pop. And
it seems like it has now.
Today.
It has now popped. And I actually remember world leaders holding her up and saying, this is the pinnacle of liberal leadership. She was celebrated in the media. Everywhere she went, she was held up, I think, alongside Justin Trudeau in a lot of ways as the future of left-wing leadership throughout the world. And my question is, what happened within her time as prime minister, within the COVID time, to make her have become a liability for the Labour Party? Because that's what it sounds like, that she herself is so unpopular that she's dragging the Labour Party down. So what has been the catalyst for that?
Broken promises. Essentially, like at the end of the day, leftist governments, and here in New Zealand, like a Labour government only has a certain tenure of how long they can be there. People have short memories, and they forget that this happens every single time. Happens every time you have a Democrat president in the States as well. There's all these promises made. We're going to do this, we're going to give you that, but eventually the check comes due, the money runs out, and they can't just hand out free stuff anymore, and then they have to do things that people don't like, or the things that they have been doing that people don't like start to rear their ugly heads a bit more, and it starts to cost, and people start have to paying for this for everything that they've been doing, and that hurts. And so that's what we've got here in New Zealand. Our infrastructure is now, woefully behind where it should be. The previous national government, which we had for 3 terms, had been doing a lot of work on infrastructure that needed to be done. And that was growing our economy, and that was, creating jobs and doing a lot of good things. And they paused all of these major roading projects. They took money out of it to fund their vanity projects, the things that they were promising people. They were sticking money in people's pockets left, right, and center, beneficiaries, all this sort of stuff. And now all of a sudden, we've had a number of storms come through which have just exposed how behind certain infrastructure things are, with flooding and all sorts of things going on, and drainage not being up to things, and slips and landslides coming down because maintenance hasn't been done on the hillsides that needed to be done because the money hasn't been there because it's been used for other things. So all of these sort of things are starting to expose what has been going on in that. And so that veneer is starting to come off a bit. They announced a project called Kiwi Build after they won their second term, which they did win in a landslide. They're currently in power without any coalition, ruling all by themselves. And they announced this Kiwi Build, because we have a little bit of a housing crisis here in New Zealand, where we don't have enough houses, and the houses that we do have are very expensive. And when I say expensive, like if you're looking for a house in a major city, sort of a 3-bedroom house, 2-bathroom, just standard sort of size house. When I say standard size house, that's a lot smaller than what you guys have in the States. We are talking anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so we are talking really, really big dollars for housing, and that if you want something a little bit more affordable, then you are going to be looking, 500 to $700,000, and you're going to be living 2 hours out of the city,
Wow.
in the country. So you're going to be, if you work in a city or you work anywhere closer there, or then this is not a possibility.
Right.
And your rents and all of that sort of thing. Like, I live here in Wellington, the capital. So I'm about 15 to 20 minutes from the CBD. I'm living in a one bedroom unit, with my wife. So we're renting here, and we're paying 425 a week,
Hmm.
for this. And I'm sure there are probably comparable, sort of prices in America and that to what we're paying here in different cities and stuff like that. But you guys are also, you're making a lot more money than what we make here in
Right.
New Zealand as well.
Right.
So like, it is, these things balance each other out. Like, we're a very small country,
Right.
and that is reflected in how much, how many jobs there are available that make, XYZ sort of money. So
And
anyway, we had this Kiwi Build initiative where they promised they were going to build 100,000 homes, um, in I think it was like 3 to 5 years. So they had certain numbers they were going to do. So this was
mhm.
a complete government-led initiative. They were going to build these homes. They were going to be affordable homes for normal people to be able to go and buy. And so when the prices came out, they're like, and these houses are going to be anywhere from, sort of 700,000 to 1.2 million. I was like, well, how's that affordable for the normal person at all?
It's clearly not. And in terms of the veneer you've talked about, like you said, New Zealand's a small country, so we don't get a lot of media in the US
Mm.
from it. So when there is something attention grabbing, like Jacinda Ardern, like a liberal government, it really is the only content we get. And one of the things we heard about during COVID, and even in recent months, is she's so popular. She has so much youth support, specifically young people in New Zealand are coming out in droves to support her. They love her. So as a young person in New Zealand, is that true? And is there support for conservative parties or movements in New Zealand politics right now as well?
Again, this is a yes and no question, because there is, very active, centre right conservative, youth support. Like the National Party and the ACT Party both have youth wings, which are, excuse me, extremely active, and do a very good job of, educating young people around these sort of things. But as a whole, you're always going to have youth support for leftist politics, because as youth just swing left anyway, because it seems like a morally good thing to do, because it's all based around feelings and doing this, and it's very idealistic, but it doesn't actually work in the real world. Like leftist politics, like, we're going to help people, we're going to do this, socialism, all of these sort of things, like, it's very idealistic. It looks like it works on the surface, but as you actually start digging in, as you hit the real world and you figure out how the real world works, and that, if you want to help people, then you need to put policies in place that might not, feel so great for
Mm-hmm.
everybody right now, but they're going to build a strong economy and a strong country, which are going to provide jobs, and everybody's going to be able to support themselves, instead of a government, handing out. So yes, there is youth support for Jacinda, but actually, I see a lot more youth support for the Green Party. To be honest,
Mm-hmm.
I get very plugged in on social media and stuff with all the different, not party affiliated pages, but different groups in that. So and just looking at who the people are in these, and then understanding who they are, and actually being able to see them in the real world a little more, rather than behind the social media mask that you see. So I'm a part of a couple of very leftist locked groups, which you have to answer a lot of questions to get in, so I shut up and don't say anything, no matter how much I want to. But it does give me a lot of insight into what their thinking is and these sort of things. And these are the sort of like eat the rich
Hmm.
sort of pages. Landlords are all evil. We should be taking pitchforks out and hanging these people and burning them from the street lamps sort of groups. But it has given me a real insight into, and they are all full of young people in that who
Wow.
have certain political figures on the left here in New Zealand and just worldwide, and that they really do worship. And a lot of them actually, whilst they will all vote either Labour or the Greens,
Hmm.
they actually get very annoyed with Jacinda that she doesn't go
Really?
far enough. So they're happy with what she does do, but they're annoyed that she doesn't go far enough. They more look at her as somebody who has championed leftist values and has
Hmm.
pushed it to a certain point, and it's further than it's ever been before, and made people like the left more. But she needs to go further.
And in terms of
And
the
it's all a journey. It's all a path. She started that, and the next person needs to take it further.
And in terms of the future post Jacinda, because like you said, she has sort of been this entryway for more leftist policies to go through. What does that look like for the Labour Party, for the Liberal movement in New Zealand post her? Because she's made it very clear she's leaving as Prime Minister. No one's going to change her mind. She's out. She held a
Mm-hmm.
press conference. Once you hold a press
Yep.
conference, you can't really go back. So what is that Labour Party going to look like? She's been the leader for several years now.
Yes, been the thing that's been the most interesting, because at one point, as I said at the beginning, like, did this take me by surprise? Yes and no. I was looking at the whole political landscape and seeing, like, I didn't see how she could win the next election. And so she's jumped off because she doesn't want to be at the head of that sinking ship. And there are a lot of things going on in the background. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of talk around different things and that. And for her, like, what is going to be next for her, and if she is helming a sinking party through an election, that is going to hurt her reputation. It's going to hurt her job opportunities going forward.
Mhm.
Like the previous Labour leader, Helen Clark, who was actually the last Labour Prime Minister of New Zealand, 3 terms in office, absolutely destroyed our economy and put New Zealand in a very similar position as to what we are now. Has got one of the top jobs in the United Nations now. It's like, good job, you screwed New Zealand, and now you get this job. So if Jacinda goes down with this ship and leads it there, I think potentially she's looking, going, this is going to hurt my future job
I
opportunities a
see.
bit. So I need to look at what is next, and I need to get off now before this thing goes down. So whilst it did surprise that it just completely came out the blue, looking at the whole thing, it's not so much of a surprise going forward. But what does this party look like going forward? Because they don't have somebody like Jacinda. When she came in, the
Right.
party was tanking. They were losing the election hard. And 6 weeks out from the election, they just switched the leader. This guy who was leading, no charisma, no nothing. He goes, same policies, no policies change. And they jump from 20 something in the polls to 45% in the polls with her overnight, because she was this charismatic person that was able to come in, and everyone went, oh, we like her. And I was like, you're all stupid. So
We've
yeah,
we've
and
had that
now,
happen in the US though. We've had
oh,
that
have you? Have you?
that well, you know what I always say, it's like people elect a Democrat because they get tired of the stuffy old Republican dude, and they're like, oh, I want somebody who plays the saxophone, who's really fun and everything.
Obama.
Yeah, and it's like the Bill Clinton or Obama thing, and they were like, yeah, but that person, the last time we had Democrats, they tanked the economy. So we've seen exactly this, and
But
one
people
thing.
forget.
They forget. And one thing I want to know is, what does the future look like for the conservative parties? Because it seems like you're in that stage in the cycle now where people are frustrated and have no money or food, and so they want a conservative. So what does the future look like for the conservative political parties now in New Zealand?
Well, just like the Labour Party, before Jacinda came along, where they lacked leadership, they lacked somebody who was able to be at the front and people liked. Ever since the National Party and the Conservatives lost the election 2 years ago, they lost their leaders that had been, the charismatic people at the front that everybody loved. Those people moved on, and they went through a rotation of leaders. They actually had a really good young leader who came up exactly at the same time as Jacinda, opposite on the other side of the bench. and he took over running the National Party, and I really liked him. But man, the media here did a
Yeah.
hit job on him. Every single thing was, oh, he's done that, he's doing this, he's that. He never done anything wrong or anything like that. It wasn't that those sort of things. It was just making a mockery of him because he didn't say something as well as he could have, or just fabricating garbage. Every day there was another thing, criticizing him, attacking him for this, for that, the other thing. And this was the first, here in New Zealand, the indigenous people are the Maori. And if you look at our politics of looking, having a government for everybody and
Mhm.
working together, it's been very good compared to Australia or the US and different things like that. And he was the first Māori leader of a major party. And generally, the Māori people swing quite hard left. The Labour Party panders to them about what things they can give them for free to, farm their votes. And here we had a leader of the centre right, who the first major party leader who was Māori, and the media just spent the entire time just attacking him. Um, I really think that he could have led things through if they had stuck with him, but they got scared after the election when National didn't do well. Like, nobody was going to do good against Labor in that election,
Right.
and so they replaced him, and then they just went through a cycle of different leaders, just one after the other,
Is
trying to
that what
find the
you're in
right
now?
person. Well, they've landed on one guy who is the previous CEO of Air New Zealand, which is the major airline carrier here in New Zealand, which is a very respected airline worldwide. Like, it's one of the top rated airlines in the whole world, flies all over the place. And so he's run a business and done all these sort of things, and he's come in, and he's a bit like Trump in the way that he's not afraid to say what needs to be said, but he has a heck of a lot more polish than Trump.
Mm.
And he's a businessman. He's done all these sort of things. He's quite new in the political arena. So it's kind of, when he kind of stumbles over himself because he's not sure how to do something, everyone's kind of like funny baby sort of thing. And
That
so
could be
there's a lot more
helpful.
grace, very much so, and he's doing
Yeah.
very well, and people like him. He's a likable person. He knows what he's talking about, and he has learned very quickly how to do things and get things going. And that goes to show, National is leading Labor in the polls, and he continually rises in preferred prime minister stakes day by day, and was catching Jacinda. So he is doing very, very good. His name's Christopher Luxton, and he's started to be referred to as the bald head egg of New Zealand, because we're in a bit of an egg shortage crisis. So,
Ah,
and he's
yes.
got
So
his
are
head
we.
kind of looks like an egg.
The United States is
Yeah,
in an
another
egg
Jacinda
crisis.
muck up while we have
Yep.
no eggs. Oh my goodness.
Hey, it can be a Biden muck up as well because we have no eggs either, and people are buying
Yes.
chickens rather than buying eggs. And I think that that's sort of an indicator of where we are globally. And I want to
But
know,
being Americans, where are they going for their chickens? Are they rocking up to KFC for them, or what?
no, we're buying legitimate chickens, and I don't know where they're coming from. I heard on the news they might be coming from Mexico, and if we're buying chickens from Mexico to raise eggs here, I think that that's maybe an indicator that we should not have Democrats be running the country again. But just sort of in closing, we talked a little bit about the fallout of the COVID policies and all of that. In
Oh,
terms of the media in New Zealand, because this is something Americans we're not really privy to, was the media coverage of Jacinda, did it help her cover up her mistakes for a long time? Or
100%,
okay, so that's what
100%.
the system was. So now that she has said she's going to resign, is that partially because the media is no longer covering for her, like it isn't here for a lot of Democrats, or is it just a her driven decision?
A bit of both. Like, the media can only cover so much. Like, eventually, like, the state of things cannot be covered, and the what is going on has to be reported.
Mhm.
Once we were in the grips of the COVID pandemic, Jacinda's government paid out millions of dollars to the major media corporations here in New Zealand to keep them afloat because they were going to go under.
Mm.
So that they get a certain amount of government funding, but, like, these people at the top owed their jobs to her,
Mhm.
and they did a lot of butt covering for her. But you can't cover everything up that's going on at the end of it. You know, our inflation here in New Zealand is just absolutely through the roof at the moment. You know, we've had what is it, 7.3% in this last quarter, rise in inflation. And that's gone up by 7.3%, I think, twice already this year as well. Last year, sorry. And you know, to kind of put that in perspective, you know, the normal sort of inflation is like 2%
Wow.
in a year, and you know, we've gone up 7.3% three times in 1 year.
Wow.
And that is just, this is because the tourism industry, which our economy has been built on, has been completely gutted by these policies, and this constant flip-flopping. Like, the borders are going to be open, now they're closed, now they're not,
Right.
and people just like, we'll just wait a couple of years, you know, we'll just
Ah,
wait a couple of
yes.
years, and then we'll come back once things are happening. But you know, in that time, you know, multiple businesses have closed down. You know, it's not just the people that are running, you know, the tourist rides and then go come around and see New Zealand sort of stuff. It's all the coffee shops, it's the
Right.
little
It's all the levels of
bakeries,
businesses.
it's you know, I'm a mechanic by trade. You know, I run a garage, and you know, we see all of these tourists going up and down the country. You know, we service all these caravans, we do all this, so suddenly all of that work is gone um from our workflow and that, so we start to see this effect. So yeah, the our food prices, you know, are the highest that they've been in 32 years. You know, they're just, and it's just going up and up and up. And you know, we notice this each week. You know, as we go to the supermarket, every single person feels that, you know, our fuel prices have just gone through the roof. And what Jacinda has done and been doing is been putting band-aids wherever she could to, and I think that the idea was to try to keep going for this next election, but they've seen that this is just not going to work. Like, they discounted all public transport by 50%. They for a certain amount of time, but that's finished now. They were doing it for 6 months, and then they did it for another 6 months on top because they were trying to keep it going, and there's just not the money, they can't do it anymore. So that's just bounced back to full price. They had, I think it was 25 cents off fuel, discounting the fuel, because the fuel price was just going up and up. Like, we were paying, I think we're up to $3.80 for a liter of petrol. And yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. So like, that price has dropped down a little bit by itself, because oil was going up quite a bit worldwide. But you know, we're little old New Zealand, right down here at the bottom of the world. We don't need as much as
Right.
everywhere else needs, and it's
Right.
further to bring it. So that puts more on top of what we're paying. And then if you look, you know, 50% of what we pay in our fuel is tax. Like, we pay more tax in our fuel than any other first world country. It's crazy. And you know, they were just lumping more and more on top of it, and so they started, excuse me, they were discounting it back, so that it wasn't hurting. Because every time, you know, a Kiwi goes to the fuel pump or to the supermarket, we're reminded what this government is doing and how much they're screwing everything up, because money is not coming in the country like it was.
Right.
And at first it wasn't so bad because we had a false bubble, and this is what I said. You know, people come
Yes, we had that here
in our
too.
office, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, everything's fine. Look, there's so much money. Everyone's got money to spend. Everyone's doing stuff." And it's like,
No.
yes, that's because nobody's been overseas or done anything, or been on holiday or done anything. So you've got extra money in your back pocket. But when that runs dry, there isn't anything
Yeah,
left,
we had
because
that
the
bubble here
government
too.
has spent so much, and it took a while to pop, and it took till
Hmm.
this year. It took 2 years, and everything just looked kind of okay and was still running okay. And then this last year, 2022, that popped, and it popped big,
We
and it
saw that in the
hurt, and
US
it's
as well.
hurting.
We
Mm.
saw that here. We saw that in the UK, especially, is suffering
Mm.
from quite a bit of economic uncertainty. And you mentioned this bubble popping. I think here it's been a little bit, because we're such a big country, it's been a little bit petering out, but it is definitely a marker of liberal leadership worldwide. And that's something obviously Jacinda Ardern has been dealing with. And I wanted to know, just sort of to wrap up, what is your prediction for the future, for the next New Zealand election? Obviously, Jacinda Ardern will not be prime minister, but if you had to guess what it will look like post-election day, what would you say?
Well, I would like to say that National will win, and should win good. The problem is now is I actually fear that Labour has made a very smart move in taking away Jacinda, because now they can effectively wipe the slate. They've brought in a guy who has no charisma, but he has been in front of everybody doing the daily, he's been the COVID response minister, and he has been standing up in front of everybody, letting everyone know what's going on, what things needs to be done. So he is very well known by New Zealanders, although he doesn't have a lot of as I said, charisma and that, and he's not like really good with all of the stuff. He's just been there every single day in front of everybody, and I've been doing what I've been told to do, and I've done a good job there. And like the job that he's done okay. Like I could criticize and poke holes in a lot of stuff, but to the general person, like, he's done pretty good. And talking with people, they're like, oh yes, yeah. So yeah, the new guy, I like him. He's better. Like people that were like, I don't like Jacinda anymore. She's messing up everything. I like this guy. We'll see how it goes. This is gonna be better. And so, like, effectively the policies that were very unpopular, the policies that were being ripped apart by the media and shown to be a issue and all of this sort of thing, they can effectively wipe that slate clean. They can be like, hey, we're not gonna do this anymore. We've got a new guy. We're gonna do different things. So there's a little bit of uncertainty. I'm not quite sure what this is gonna look like, and it's a little bit nerve-wracking. And I'm just like,
oh, that clean slate can be so dangerous. We had that here where they were like, we had a clean slate issue with Biden. And I remember saying the nostalgic danger of Joe Biden. So you can have a clean slate issue. So good luck there. So just to let people know, where can they follow New Zealand news? Where can they find out some idea of what's going on the daily? Because here in the United States, we don't have a lot of international news that's routinely showed to us.
I'll jump on stuff.co.nz and have a look. That's a pretty good news source. Now, as I've said here, our news is more left leaning, unfortunately, but it is they've got a pretty good cross section of things. They're like, you just got to read it and understand that it's going to have that leftist veneer. We don't really have a
we're used to
conservative news outlet in New Zealand. So yeah, jump on stuff.co.nz and you'll get a pretty good bunch of news about what's going on here.
Perfect. And we'll link that below. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us a roundup of what's going on in the New Zealand political process, because we certainly don't get it here from our news anchors.
All good. Now, I've really enjoyed this, so thank you so much. I could talk here for another 5 or 6 hours on all of this stuff, following everything and nothing at all out. But yeah, so maybe, if everybody wants to hear some more, I can jump back on with you at some point and we can dive into it a bit more.
Definitely. We want to keep getting that international perspective. Thank you so much for coming on.
Fantastic. Thanks, Magdalene.